You look good in front of green.
Well, thanks. I appreciate that, Greg. And we are back at it, ladies and gentlemen. I apologize, Greg. You don't know this, but I was just in the middle of a live stream, and I get so many things going on, and this note pops up. Greg Lawson, 2 p.m. I'm like, oh, crap. I forgot we got Greg at 2 p.m., so we had to cut that one short. And tomorrow, believe it or not, we've got a shapeshifter reptilian lady coming on in this time slot, so it should be really interesting. Greg Lawson has been a friend of mine for several years. We met at a conference, I believe, in San Antonio. He's known as the Paranormal Detective. He's been on Coast to Coast. He's been on Midnight in the Desert, author of many books. And Greg, what you do is something that is sorely needed, I think, in the paranormal realm. There's too much flying by the seat of your pants. There's too much shoddiness, and we need somebody like you to teach us how to apply the principles of investigation into our genre. And with that, it looks like he's also a guitar player and owner of a highly finicky cat. Ladies and gentlemen, I give you Greg Lawson.
Hey, everybody. Thanks for having me on, man.
It's my pleasure. We met many years ago now, huh, in San Antonio.
Yeah, it like in 2012, 2013, something like that.
It was a while ago. And I've always felt like you're my friend. We don't talk that much, but we reach out every now and then, and I'm glad we got back in contact with one another.
One of the things in my life that I guess I'm jealous of is you and Wes Forsythe got to hang out. And I got to hear about it the next day. And that was like, man, why wasn't I there?
That was forgettable. Oh my gosh. Back then I used to drink a little bit.
Yeah.
They had us go to that thing, with all the speakers at that forum, and we're eating these dinners, and I kept finishing this margarita, and they kept setting another one back down because they were free.
I tell you what,
got really ugly really fast.
I was so jealous that I wasn't there.
It was awful, man. It was awful. But Greg, you are a law enforcement professional, and you've had at least a semi-recent promotion. You're now an officer, I understand. And what a fascinating way to take what you do and take another one of your passions and merge them together and make us all the better for it, at least on the paranormal end. Has the paranormal end ever helped your law enforcement end?
Sure. I've been in law enforcement for about 28 years. And like you said, I recently promoted to lieutenant. My specialty in the last few years has been aquatic death investigation. I was a supervisor over a lake patrol unit and a underwater recovery unit, a dive team. And while I didn't use in those particular cases, I didn't use anything outside of what an industry standard is. Mm-hmm. In the past, I've worked as a homicide investigator, and when you get to a point in a case where you have no other leads, you don't have anywhere to go, you have to ask yourself, what's it going to hurt if I go ahead and reach out to the community? What's it going to hurt if I go ahead and reach out to anybody who says that they're a medium or a psychic or clairvoyant, audient, whatever it is, and provide them a situation where possibly they could help? And the real key thing about any kind of open investigation like that is not revealing specific things about the case that only the suspect would know. That's huge, and so in those cases, and I was a mental health detective or mental health investigator for a couple of years. Now they call them critical incident team members, and back then we dealt with EDPs, emotionally disturbed persons, and I loved that job just because it was so strange. And I mean, who else on the planet really gets paid as a real investigator to investigate CIA, claims of abduction, aliens,
probably a lot of people saying they're targeted individuals.
Oh, right? Yeah. Yeah.
Greg, is that a real thing, or is that mainly just a bunch of crazy people?
It is what a real thing.
Being a targeted individual.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
It is a real thing.
Yeah. It can be a real thing. And when you're in junior high, and it can be a real thing when you're an adult. Absolutely.
Interesting. See, I didn't know that. And I think you know John D'Souza, right?
I do not. No.
But John D'Souza, I've met him several times. He's a former FBI agent, and he's written several books along. He's retired now, and he says that he thinks that the best investigators are those that follow the protocol, do the job the right way, but will also allow their sixth sense, if you will, to kick in at appropriate instances and allow them to make leaps possibly in a case that can't be made by other means.
I completely agree with him. I mean, he's got a lot more experience than I do, but in that, something that you really have to be very careful of is your gut instinct. While you want to listen to it, you also want to rely 100% on, the physical evidence and whatever the testimony is that you're getting.
Do those conflict a lot, Greg?
They can. Yeah. The interesting thing is, for instance, as an investigator, you don't, let's say you're involved in a homicide and you're trying to figure out what happened in this homicide. What you're also trying to figure out is what didn't happen on the homicide, because, for instance, the yogurt shop murders in Austin, Texas. There was some girls that were killed after they had gotten off work at this yogurt shop, and they burnt the yogurt shop down. And this investigation went on forever, and it was just a complete train wreck. The main thing about it was they had 42 people come forward and confess to killing those girls.
42 people confessed.
Yeah. So you're not only trying to figure out what happened, you're trying to figure out what didn't happen.
I thought that was just a TV thing. That's real.
Oh,
people
no.
call up and confess to heinous crimes.
Absolutely.
Because they're bored? They want the notoriety? What is it?
Yeah, it's a notoriety thing, I think. I mean, there's all kinds of different motivations. But yeah, man, people are so critical of law enforcement on how things are done. Like D'Souza said, the protocol is more important.
Right.
Following a procedure is more important than getting a confession. Doing the right thing, covering all your bases. And like I said, it's an industry standard kind of way to approach an investigation. And that's what I try to help with people. And it's something I found out in the paranormal realm is there's a lot of people out there that don't want to be told what to do. So they're just going to go and do their thing. And I don't have a problem with it. I classify paranormal investigators in three ways. I classify them as a ghost hunter or a paranormal investigator, and I throw my thing in there as a paranormal detective, because a ghost hunter is a guy that's going to go, hey man, there's a really cool looking old cemetery over there. Let's go check it out. And you go and you stumble around the cemetery and you look at the stuff, and maybe something happens, maybe something doesn't, but you're just kind of hunting around. It's the same thing with urban exploration or whatever. And then you have your paranormal investigator who listens to a legend or a story and then goes to that location and tries to support that legend or story based on what they experience at that location. Well, and that's cool, man. I don't have a problem with anybody doing any of that. And I'm not judging you on it, because it takes so much time.
Right.
To do it right. And for usually, a ghost hunt is 6 hours in the middle of the night. You pay $100 to go in this weird house, and there's 20 other people in there, and there's all kinds of stuff going on. So it can cause a lot of conflict and confusion. And then if you really want to do it, you step up, and like I said, I'm using the air quotes, paranormal detective. And what I mean by that is you back your investigation based on your training and your experience. So we have people out there that in the past have had great and very successful TV shows. Don't have a lick of investigative experience. They could not tell you how a K2 meter actually works. And don't get me wrong, I enjoy the show,
right?
But if you want people to take you seriously, you might want to take an interview course, on how to interview somebody, or how to interrogate somebody, how to cross-examine somebody, you know, forensic examination of statements. And, you know, there's just so much stuff that, like, as a homicide detective, you know, you have 8-12 weeks of training in just how to talk to people, just how to glean information out of people, how to read them. You know, do you want to ask them questions, or do you just want to sit there in a room and talk about nothing, talk about nonsense or sports or movies or whatever? It's pretty amazing. I've worked with some investigators that were absolutely, the stuff that they would get in confessions was amazing. And they never ask any questions. They would go in there, hey, how's it going? You know, and they just start talking, and they talk and talk and talk. And 2 hours later, the suspect is sitting there going, okay, I did it. I did it. I just don't want to hear you talk anymore. You know,
that's hilarious. It's
yeah,
funny that, but I'm sure that it's really true. Now, just a couple law enforcement questions, if you don't mind.
Sure.
Is there really, I know that you want to stay to procedure because you want to do things right, but is there really this, as we see on TV, this big gulf between the police and then the legal system? Is it really hard for you as a law enforcement officer to get something that you know needs to be prosecuted and get the legal end of it to buy on? Is there really that rivalry, or is that more something that's dramatized on TV?
I think it can be both.
Okay.
I've seen both, and you know, it just depends on who your DA is. Depends on, you know, what their affiliations are. It depends also a lot on your case. I mean, even if a DA doesn't want to prosecute, let's say, like the big controversy nowadays is prosecuting marijuana cases,
right?
And you know, I think most states are going to go with legalizing marijuana in the next 20 years, and that's going to relieve a huge amount of prison issues. And if these folks are, you know, being arrested for that, you know, they should be going into drug treatment, not into prisons. And so it's not serving us any purpose. So
I agree.
You get these arguments back and forth. And, you know, if you have a guy that has marijuana and it's packaged to deliver, and you investigate this crime and do your due diligence, finding the money laundering, finding them, you know, all of that, it's kind of hard for a DA, even if they don't want to do it, to not file something, you know, not kick it over to the feds and go, okay, you know, you recovered $500,000 and where's the tax records on this stuff? You know, so you kick it over to the feds. You don't just go, yeah, I decline prosecution. I'm not messing with that. So you work it out, you know, but yeah, there is an absolute, there's tension between, prosecution and law enforcement, and the prosecutors know a lot of stuff. I mean, they went through law school. They went through a lot of training compared to what a cop goes through conceptually. The cop knows the technical side of it, and the real side of it on how it is actually applied. We had a I went out of state and we did a conference on major crimes, and one of the people that came in said that 92% or something like that of sexual assault victims, or 92% of individuals who come forward about sexual assault is true and legitimate, and you know, this needs to be followed up. And I'm just sitting there listening to this going, no. 92% of the cases that cops give you as a prosecutor, you know, are legitimate cases. Not the rest of us, though, because we call out a bunch of that stuff. Gotcha. Because I mean, people are people, and they make mistakes, and then they try to figure out how they're going to cover their mistakes, and voila, we got a claim of sexual assault.
Yeah. Now, Greg, as a law enforcement professional, and as a, you know, I know you're a good law enforcement professional. You're an honorable law enforcement professional. Why do you think we have this growing rift between citizens and police officers in this country today? It's getting almost a boiling point, it seems.
Well, the media would like to think that way. They want to manipulate and control that. I just refer back to, hey, do a little research in history and look at the 1960s, 70s, and 80s.
Oh, good point.
All you got to do is look there. Twice the amount of cops were getting killed back then than they are now.
See, I didn't know that.
Oh yeah, it's the media plays this stuff up. I cannot tell you how many times in the last every year for like the last 5 years, people that come up to me and say, hey, thank you for your service. Hey, I really appreciate it. Buy me coffee, buy my lunch, give me a meal card, like a little gift card or something. And that, I don't remember that in my career prior to that. Every once in a while, somebody'd say, hey, thank you for what you do, but yeah, that's pure propaganda. And the bad thing about it is there's a lot of cops out there that buy into it. Now, don't get me wrong. There are areas in the world or in the United States. I mean, you look at, I don't know what the numbers right offhand, but Detroit has a higher murder, rate than Syria.
Right.
So, when you're trying to refer, where's really bad and what's not, well, I think it depends on where you are. When you're not in a major city, most people other than the meth users are sort of appreciative of cops, or at least they're tolerant of it. And so, man, it's just, there's a lot of politics going on. And, we had an officer that was very disgruntled about the way they were being treated, by their perception of the way that the public treats law enforcement, not them specifically, but the way public treats law enforcement. And they ended up resigning. And before they resigned, I was talking to them and they said, yeah, nowadays it's so terrible. It's so this, it's so that. They're so against us and everything. I was like, man, you need to read your history. And he goes, yeah, well, I'm going to go be a fireman. I said, you need to go be a fireman, because there's no controversy in that.
Right.
Law enforcement knows I don't need a pat on my back, because what I do is very controversial in a lot of, in a lot of realms. We look at whether there's violations made, we try to make the best decision, and we go from there. And there's going to be controversy, and it's not a science, it's a liberal art, and it's meant to be argued, because in different jurisdictions, different locations, they may want to enforce the law in a different way, a community standard kind of way. So,
absolutely.
I could go on for like hours.
Yeah. I want to ask you a question, and if you want to defer, I completely and totally understand it. I do have a lot of subscribers in this channel who are Black, and a lot of the Black subscribers have the idea that the police are out to get them. They complain about things like driving while Black, that kind of stuff. Do you want to address that or not?
So is there racism? Absolutely. There's racism on all sides, and I've experienced racism. I'm sure anybody that's listening to this right now has experienced some form of racism in their life. And I feel for people, because I've seen it. I've seen, a Lincoln Town car that would drive through this particular small town every night at 2:00. And for about the first couple of months that it did that, it got stopped. I was driving that Lincoln Town car. Yeah. And so I would get off work. And this is when we didn't have take-home cars. I would get off work, and this girl that I was dating at the time, her grandmother had a Lincoln Town car that she gave to her. And it was nice. It was the champagne edition gold, sweet.
I actually had one of those.
Yeah. And so I would get that, and I would drive home, and my drive home was about 40 miles, and it was through a rural area, and I would go through a particular town, and man, just about every time, until they until they figured out, oh, this gold car that comes through here at 2:30 in the morning is this cop from this other jurisdiction.
That's funny.
And so, there's no doubt that goes on. It's like with the Lincoln Town car. I don't know if you'd call that racial profiling, but it's certainly profiling. And that's the funny thing is, I've had arguments with people and they're like, you're profiling because I have prison tattoos. I said, no, that's called a clue that you contact. Yeah. It doesn't have anything to do with whether, your race, color, creed, religion, national origin, whatever. It has to do with whether you're a convict, and you are. So
right.
And that's what cops do. They profile. That's what you do. If you're not out there profiling, you're not doing your job. You're looking for odd behavior. You're looking for suspicious people in suspicious places and signs of deception and collusion and all that stuff. If you're not doing that and you're just sitting on the side of the road, watching your YouTube channel on your police laptop. So yeah.
Funny stuff. And, I forget who made the joke, but there's one of the comedians made a joke. If you're having trouble with the police, you might want to think about obeying the law. That goes a long way towards it. But that helps. Frustrates me, and this isn't a black white thing, but you see these videos on YouTube of these people that, a police officer just comes up, asks them a casual question. Are you detaining me? Are you on my rights? And they don't want to, really? This guy's going to tase you and you deserve it.
It's incredible, and I give them all their props. I mean, if they're going to live in some sort of fantasy world that they're not going to agree with what a majority of everybody else agree with, and they want to live in this, whatever their world is, more power to them. Problem is they're going to go to jail,
Exactly.
There's
exactly,
you don't go to another country and go, you know what, I can do whatever the hell I want to do here. Go to Singapore and chew some gum and see what happens to you.
How that works out for you. And how long have you been involved in the paranormal side of things? Was that before law enforcement, after, same time?
It was before. My brother's 12 years older than I. And so when I was 5, he was 17 and he had an old Triumph motorcycle, and he would take me without a helmet and set me on the gas tank. And we would go ride around on the back roads of Central Texas. And he was looking for graveyards and old abandoned buildings, just basic urban or / rural exploration and going out and looking at things. So we would go find these old family cemeteries, and we would get off, and he would walk around with me and he would read the tombstones to me.
Mm-hmm.
And he would always look for the youngest kid in the graveyard. That's what we were go around. And then he would make up some sort of story, some sort of horrific thing that happened to this kid. And, this kid's younger than you are, he'd scare the hell out of me. And so that's kind of where it started, because, I was 5. By the time I was 8 or 9, I was doing that to friends of mine, at school. We would go to the graveyard or whatever. And so it just kind of went from there through high school, doing the same thing. And then when I went into the Army, I got to travel all over the place. I was with a rapid deployment unit, 82nd Airborne Division out of North Carolina.
Oh yeah.
And
I saw a lot of you jump out of perfectly good airplanes, Greg.
That's right. What?
I saw a lot of you guys jump out of perfectly good airplanes.
Yeah. I've never seen a perfectly good military airplane, but yes, that's the idea. And so I got to go all over Alaska, Central America, Northern Europe. Northern Africa, Middle East, a little bit into Southern Europe. And so I got to go to a lot of places. And the very moment that we were off, okay, you guys have liberty for 2 days or whatever it is, I was in the indigenous population and I was going and look at whatever the weird thing is to look at.
That's awesome.
I was kicked out of the pyramid at Giza. I bet I'm the only person that that got a criminal trespass warning from a guard at the Giza pyramid.
You got in there. Good for you.
I did. Yeah. So I was over by the Sphinx, and there's nobody on the street because it was prayer hour or whatever. And there's a couple of white dudes walking around. I don't know who the other guy was, but So I'm trying to figure out how to take a picture of me in front of the Sphinx because nobody was there. Well, there's this Bedouin, this traveling guy, and he's dressed in robes and everything. He says, I'll take a picture. I'll take a picture. So I hand him my camera and I stand in front of the Sphinx, and he takes a picture, and I go back to get my camera. He says $5.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, great. So I'm like, oh, really? So we're talking. I'm like, okay, give him $5, So I give him $5. He goes, have you been in the pyramid? And I said, no. And he goes, I can, take you into the pyramid. I said, yeah, it'd be great. So we go over there and we go around the little barricade and, the little ropes that they had out there. And we go into the Grand Gallery.
Oh my God.
And we go. Amazing. So the people that haven't ever been to Giza, the Great Pyramid, when they actually tried to get in there, they fortified this pyramid where they didn't want anybody in there. Well, they had to blast. And when they hit the granite, they had to blast around the granite through the limestone and make this little tunnel. It's called Robber's Tunnel, I think. And so you have to go through that in order to get into the Grand Gallery. And the Grand Gallery is just a set of stairs that goes all the way up to the center where the King's Chamber is. And it's just, I'm standing there with this guy and we start walking up the stairs, and it's as amazing as it sounds. Oh. And he was an old man. And so he's kind of huffing and puffing behind me. And I was like, you don't have to come all the way up if you don't want to. What's up there? He goes, oh, nothing. It's just a King's Chamber. And I said, and I had paid him $20, by the way. I left that out. And he said, oh, okay. I said, yeah, you can stay down here and I'll just go up. Is there anything up there? He goes, no, it's just a King's Chamber. So I go up there and I go in the King's Chamber, and I'm the only dude in the pyramid, man. That would
have been fantastic, Greg.
Yeah. And so I'm like, I would have been 19 or 20 years old at this time. And I walk around in the King's Chamber, and the sarcophagus, it's gone, but the place that it was put into was still there. It's kind of broken down. Mm-hmm. And there's one light in this place. And I'm thinking, man, I'm a kid from Central Texas, and I'm standing in a pyramid. So I go, and I didn't know what to really do. And I was raised Catholic. I always make a joke, and I'm a recovering Catholic.
Yeah.
But I went through the whole thing, and I was an altar boy and the whole deal. And I was like, man, I'm just going to sit here and listen to the pyramid. So I just sat down and didn't say anything, didn't do anything. I just tried to have that metaphysical experience of some sort. And I was probably there 25, 30 minutes. And I got up, and it was amazing, but nothing, I didn't see anybody. The Pharaoh didn't welcome me or anything. I'm like, all right, well, I'm going to go ahead and head down. So I go out of the King's Chamber. I'm going back down the Grand Gallery stairs, and I see this guy way down at the bottom. He's dressed in all white, and he's coming up, and he's got white pants and a white shirt and a black belt. And as I'm getting closer to him, I realize, oh, this is like a guard or something. He's got a gun on and everything. And he starts saying, is anyone with you? And I was like, no. He said, is anyone else with you? I said, no. He said, what are you doing in the pyramid? I said, I'm touring the Grand Gallery, and the thing is, the pyramid is closed. So this street person had made me pay him to get me in here. I wasn't supposed to be in there. And like I said, it was prayer hour. And so I got criminal trespassed. He made me leave and not come back.
Well, that was worth it though.
Yeah. I'm just so glad I didn't go to jail, in Cairo. That would have sucked. I was in jail, Cairo West, a military jail for 3 days.
Not a chamber, I'm guessing.
No, due to a misunderstanding. And
slight misunderstanding.
Yeah. But yeah, I'm glad I didn't go to the real jail, the citizens jail.
I bet you are. Greg, and talking about paranormal, and this is a frustration that I have with paranormal, and I'm not even an investigator. I don't know what I'm doing like you do, but you go out there, you go traipsing through the woods, and you come to this place, and everybody's got their spirit box, right? And it's, oh, look, they just said, I've been dead for 10 years. I'm like, No, they didn't. I think we should throw the spirit box, get it out of paranormal. It's the worst piece of equipment ever.
So let me address this. All
Please.
right. So in law enforcement, we have industry standards, like we talked about, best practices, and we have accepted scientific instruments and that sort of thing, because they've been validated through a series of tests and all that.
Right.
We'll say, yes, this is what this does. And that's the thing about the paranormal is, I mean, this is going to sound real simplistic, what I'm about to say, but I want you to contemplate it later. So you're looking for the paranormal using normal means. In other words, you're using visual, you're using audio, you're using magnetic, you're using stuff that we know. Well, if we're looking for something paranormal, do we even know what we're searching for? Now, you can look at things that are unusual. You go in and people, people use K2 meters all different ways. Some people talk to them, set them on the floor and then talk to them and wait for the lights to light up. Some people use them by moving them around and finding, an area with higher electronic, magnetism kind of stuff going on. Yeah. And so, it just kind of depends on what I use a K2 meter to eliminate any electrical lines and walls that might give us some sort of false reading.
Right.
So that's what I use the K2 meter for. And one of the reasons that people use a spirit box is not only for experimentation, but it's also ghost hunting is freaking boring, man. It's boring out of your mind. And so it's nice to have a gadget that you can look at or listen to that might have something cool that it will pick up. Now, I like the experimentation. Something I tell young cops, because I'm on my, the downside of my career here. And what I tell them is, if all of us just set out on the highway and stopped people for speeding and did drug interdiction on the highway, bodies wouldn't be found along the shoreline.
Right.
And there wouldn't be these other crimes that you find by just doing other things. So I think it's very important that law enforcement has a whole diverse group of people that like doing specific things that are different than everybody else.
That's a great point.
So I look at ghost hunting in that realm. There are some amazing paranormal researchers in the UK that have been researching the same bed, for 20 years, have had, cameras on this thing, watching it for, a huge amount of time, and some other, some other castles and stuff like that.
Right.
And then you have the people that pay $25 to go into an abandoned house and turn on their K2 meter and listen to their spirit box. The thing about the spirit box, I apologize if I'm going long on this, but the thing about the spirit box is it's up to such diverse interpretation. You could have multiple people thinking that they heard something different, but then all agreeing, oh yeah, that's what it was. And I like seeing when they're doing EVP work and they'll have a recorder. I like seeing a digital recorder and an analog recorder. And, you ask a series of questions, you do some things for 5 minutes or whatever, and you just stop and you back it up and you listen to what just happened.
I don't think I've ever seen that done.
Yeah. Instead of going, you're recording, 3 hours of whatever it is, and then going back home and sitting in front of your computer and trying to listen and going, what was that? It's nice to re-review. And that's pretty popular nowadays for a lot of people. And there's been a couple of amazing things. I was with, Amy Bruni and Adam Berry, in Mackinac Island. Mm-hmm. And I was doing a EVP session, or we were doing an EVP session with John Tenney. And it was pretty amazing, man. We had, I'm going to mess this up number wise, but let's say we had 17 people there and we were all in a circle. And the theory was, we would like to make contact with any entities that are there that would want to communicate with us. But the idea is maybe, and whatever this is, doesn't want to talk to a white guy. Maybe they want to talk to a white girl or someone else. And so, so the idea is you got these people in a circle. In this case, we had a candle, burning in the center. And we were just watching for flicker, and that could be wind or whatever else, that could be people's breath that could make it flicker. But we're kind of watching that. And everybody took turns introducing themselves and saying, is there anybody here that would like to talk to us? Please send us a sign or whatever. And then you would wait for 20 seconds or so. And then the next person would do it. The crazy part was I was there, man. We did this. And then we backed up the audio recording. And when we played it back, we had one extra person. There was a voice that said the same thing. And we were just like, wait, I was just sitting here. We did this 17 times or whatever it was. And we turned out with 18 on the audio recording. And, it was 10, 11 o'clock at night. Nobody had been drinking at this point. There was a lot of people drinking after that point.
Yeah, that's a good disclaimer at this point.
Yeah. And so, there's just different ways. Everybody's kind of experimenting in different ways. It would be great if we had a clearinghouse. So in law enforcement, you have the Uniform Crime Report through the FBI. And there are agencies that are considered what's called a reporting agency.
Right.
And there's certain size agency and they do specific things. And when you're a reporting agency, all this information, robberies, burglaries, thefts, contacts with Asians, with, Hispanic, with whatever, everything's classified and it's sent to the Uniform Crime Report. And it's the clearinghouse for what's really going on. It would be great. And I've thought about it and I thought, I'd really like to do that, but I don't want to put that much work into it. It would be great to have a clearinghouse and we would have a set of rules that, look, you can do this kind of experiment, another kind of experiment, and you get your recordings, you get all that stuff, and then you send it to this clearinghouse and it would house the clearinghouse and categorize what's going on.
That'd be a great idea.
Well, and it's interesting because there are places that people go to that have no historical reason why there should be the weirdness going on that's there. Right. And they have orbs and full body apparitions and, Satan appearing and UFOs that are there. They have everything. It's like, well, wait a second. If I talked to Rosemary Ellen Guiley about that, she would say that's the jinn. If you're getting multiple things, that's the jinn just jacking with you. And, and for your audience, a jinn is from the Islamic faith. And it's not really a demon. It's not an angel, but it's this entity that really doesn't care so much about humans, but apparently there's some rules and that they have to follow. And one of the things that they do just to jack with you, they appear to you of things that are important to you. And they relate to you. Yeah.
Somewhat like tricksters, huh?
Exactly. Yeah.
Yep. Somebody ask a question, Greg, before it goes by. Is there any, since you're on the cutting edge of this and you're the paranormal detective, is there any new tech emerging in the field that you know of?
I appreciate you saying the paranormal detective because some people call me, hey, are you a paranormal detective? I'm like, no, I am the paranormal detective.
Well, Greg, if you've watched any of my shows, I always say I am the best in the world at what I do.
There you go.
One in the world that does what I do. So you are the paranormal detective. The only other person I know of is that lady that we met in San Antonio. I can't remember her name. And she also is in law enforcement and she tries to do kind of some of the same stuff you do.
Yeah. Yeah.
You
remember? Yes.
She's in Texas too.
Yeah.
Nice lady.
She's actually writing a book. Golly, I wish I can't pull her name right now.
But anyway, yeah. But I would say you are the paranormal detective.
That's right. So the spirit box thing.
Yeah.
Um, what I think is a great idea is what they were doing at the Stanley Hotel. They have coined it as the Estes method. And what you do is you do sensory deprivation on the person that is interpreting the spirit box. So instead of just playing out this sound, they actually plug in a headset, and one person sits there with the headset on and with a blindfold of some sort on, and they sit and listen, and everybody else just kind of gathers around, and then they repeat what they're hearing out of the spirit box.
Interesting. I like that.
So you only have one interpretation that's coming out. And I kind of like that, especially, I mean, if you have somebody that says that they're a sensitive or a medium, that's the person you need to stick on the spirit box. Let them sit there and let them say the things that, you know, they think that they're hearing. And a lot of it is they are hearing the correct thing. But the way the spirit box works is it's just basically an AM or FM radio on perpetual scan.
Right.
And it's just stopping, you know, every once in a while when it hits a good signal, and it will let out 2 or 3 words of whatever that DJ or the music or whatever it is. And the theory behind that is the spirit world can control those radio waves and those radio frequencies and plan out communication that way.
Let me share something with you, Greg. This is way before I was into any of this stuff. And I grew up in Florida. I used to go to sleep at night and listen to Atlanta Braves baseball, and they were on the West Coast, and I'm up all night, and I would wake up and I would, you know, would have gone to static because the radio station's not on the air anymore. And I had this radio, and I'd wake up and it was staticky. And there was this old song called Undercover Angel, Alan O'Day. I don't know if you remember that song, but it would come on and it would play just like Undercover Angel, Midnight Fantasy, I'm Out There, and that was all it would play of the song. So it freaked me out. So I would unplug it, and it would still play that stuff, even though it was unplugged. So that's the thing about it. I think that spirit boxes can be silly, but yet spirit allegedly, or, you know, possibly was using one to contact me instead of the other way around. So I still have this grudging part of it, but some of it is just so silly. I don't want to listen to static for 3 hours, and then I hear blah, blah, and it's like a speech from the Pharaoh. I just don't get it.
I was at Warwick Castle over in England, Warwickshire.
See, that's why you're the paranormal detective.
That's right. That's right.
England and castles and stuff.
Yeah, yeah. And I was over there with Frank. What?
And they pay your way too, right?
It's crazy. Yeah.
Isn't that amazing?
I was over there with Frank Sinelli and MJ Dixon, and she was actually the one that brought us out there. And so we're in the basement or the dungeon of this castle, which you know, William the Conqueror, man. I mean, this is no joke. This is like history of murder,
yes,
abuse. I mean, just people talk about, oh, it's just terrible now. We're living in the safest, you know, the safest time ever for human beings. Even with the wars that are going on, it's still the safest time in the world for human beings. And so we were there, and Frank and a bunch of us were down in this dungeon, and we were doing an EVP session, and we were using a spirit box or an echo box. I can't remember which. But I'm a scientific materialist a lot of times. And if you want to use evidentiary testimony, it needs to be real evidence, not just something contrived. Because I think a lot of this is more metaphysical than it is, I'm going to find evidence of a ghost. I think that there is something else going on.
Excellent statement.
But I'm sitting there, and they're asking questions, and this nonsensical stuff is coming back. And whenever you burp, you know, you go, this is Greg. I just burped. Yeah. You know, or, you know, I just moved in my chair and made a funny noise or whatever. Because when you're going back in the EVP, you don't want to hear these weird squeaks and stuff like that and think that it's something when it was actually just somebody that was adjusting their
Taco Bell or something.
Yeah, exactly. Somebody's stomachs growl a lot. It's pretty cool. And you know, if you don't point that out and you go back and let somebody else review your recording, and you hear a stomach growl, you know, is anybody else here? Yeah. So it's like, oh wow, did you hear that? So when something like that happens, you're supposed to say, hey, that was me.
Mm-hmm.
And imagine you got 20 people in a room.
Oh yeah.
How many times people are going to be going, hey, sorry about that. I did that. You know, it gets really irritating. But anyway, so we're sitting in there and Frank is asking different questions and getting some nonsensical stuff and maybe something that makes a little bit of sense. But one of the guys that was there came into the room and closed the door. And Frank said, hey, who just came in? The spirit box said, Duncan.
Ooh.
And you know, there's a little bit of light in here. It's pretty dark. There's a little bit of light. And Isabel, Frank's wife, is sitting on the floor. She's a medium. And I looked down at her and I was like, are you recording this? And she nods her head. I'm like, oh my God, what the hell was that? And it was Duncan that had walked in the room. And he wasn't the one that said it. The spirit box said it. And that's one of those things where I immediately start doing statistical analysis for behavioral sciences in my head. And I'm going, okay, what are the odds?
Yeah.
You know, out of 26 letters in the English language and the amount of names that could be, it's astronomical. That's truly a miracle. You know, one in a million things that could have happened. Now, a real statistician could probably come in here and educate me a little further on the likelihood of, you know, Duncan being a popular name in England and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But this is why I do this, man. I love history. If you want to, you know, read about the Magna Carta, I think that's important, and know the dates and, you know, when Philadelphia was formed as a city and all this stuff, you want to learn that history, fine. I'm on the other side. I want to learn from our mistakes. I want to learn from the craziness that we are. And so I study history in that way. If there's an event that happened at a particular place, let's say somebody has seen a full-bodied apparition in this room, and they were praying. And then you find out that Aleister Crowley actually stayed in that room and was trying to summon demons. You know, that kind of at least gives you a little bit of legitimacy of what you're investigating. It's like, wow, you know, okay, so this is the real history. He was really here. And then here's the legend. Some people saw, you know, this white dude, you know, dressed in period clothes doing some sort of ritual. You know, that kind of supports the whole thing. So I dig it, man. I like watching that.
Circle. That time when we were in, I met you in San Antonio, right?
Yes.
Did you go to that Museum of Natural History that night they had the ghost hunt thing?
I did not.
We went there, and I was still pretty skeptical then. I guess I'm still pretty skeptical now. But the guy, you know, this one guy that worked there could see I was not, you know, really with the program, kind of rolling my eyes. He goes, come over here. And he went and he showed me their surveillance tape, Greg. And there was on the surveillance tape, there was a little girl in a long, like, sleeping gown walking across what was then like the little place where you could buy candy and stuff. But they had her on the screen, on the videotape, a little girl, and it was an apparition. It was a full body apparition, and you could kind of see through her, but it was a stinking little girl. I'm like, wow, that freaks me out. And plus I'm thinking, you know, we're big in this realm, thinking, you know, we're really spiritual people. We're just inhabiting these bodies, and we're going to leave these bodies. But if that's true, why, when we see ghosts and stuff, do we often see bodily forms?
And that's the craziness about a lot of this is we don't know what, you know, is it truly just Big Bang and all this stuff got scattered all over the place and physics, you know, coalesced it back together and it packed into planets and stars and And on certain planets, there was enough radiation and enough amino acids and stuff to actually create simple life. And that simple life turned into me going to McDonald's and eating, lunch. Or is it something else?
Yeah.
And when you start thinking about, our world right now, I don't remember the numbers right off, but we're traveling right now at about 2 million miles an hour, I believe. Because we're material chasing the sun, and the sun is cruising, through the universe. And
some
so
flat Earth friends won't agree with that, but anyway.
Yeah, well, yeah, whatever. You don't have to agree with facts. And and I've skydived a lot, and I got a problem with that. Anyway, so you look at that. And you look at to see how, physics operates, is it truly a complete accident, or is it something else? And I'm keeping my fingers crossed that it's something else, just because, I think it is. We go to places like you said, you see that video. I was in Ireland with Dave Schrader.
Mm-hmm.
And
Darkness Radio, right?
Darkness Radio, yeah. He was on, or he did Coast to Coast for a while, and Midnight in the Desert, and
Tim's his cohort too. Tim,
Tim Dennis,
Tim Dennis, good guy.
And actually, Dave has a show on Travel Channel called The Halser Files, and that's one of my favorites. And I'm not just saying that because I consider Dave a friend. I like the way they're doing it. The way they're doing it is different. And it's, they're following up on all these famous cases, and it's really interesting the way that they're doing it.
And a quick shout out too to Chris Jericho, who's friends with those. He's the famous wrestler, and Chris he's a woke guy. He's wide awake, and I've been on his Talk is Jericho podcast, and keep your eye out in the paranormal spiritual realm for Chris Jericho, because he's definitely doing some great work too. Yeah,
I think he does a cruise.
Yeah, they just did the cruise a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah, I'd love to go
on that.
Huh?
And Dave and Tim were on that cruise with them.
Yeah, I would love to go on one of those. I bet that's a blast.
It is a blast, and it's nice to see our realm kind of expanding.
Yeah, and so we're in Ireland, and the Paranormal Detective is there, and everybody's like, "Hey, let's go to we're close to Lep Castle. Let's go by there." And I'm like, "What's Lep Castle?" And everybody looked at me like I was a complete idiot. I'm like, "What? Like, you're the Paranormal Detective and you don't know what Lep Castle is?" I'm like, "Yeah, well, I can't know everything."
Yeah.
And so we went to Lep Castle, and the history behind it is, if you have a mathematical formula for a haunting, this would be it.
Wow.
It's got everything that you could think of why somebody would want to come back and haunt the place. And there's just multiple things that are going on. But one of the things that are going on is there is the historical account of a brother named Thaddeus, who was the youngest. And so he was the priest, right? I mean, that's the way it worked back in the hundreds of years ago.
Right.
And so he's the priest, and he had his oldest brother who was the warrior. His name was Teague. And they had the father that was the chieftain of the tribe. Well, the father died. So naturally, Teague would take over the family and the lands and all that stuff. But Thaddeus really didn't like Teague so much, I'm assuming, because of what he started doing. He started, when he would minister and he would hold mass, he would kind of politically try to undermine Teague. And Teague didn't like that very much. And one of the things that you would do to insult somebody is not wait for them, especially, because we didn't have watches back then. You just kind of knew when you were supposed to be someplace, and you might be a little bit late. Everybody kind of waited around. And so you certainly didn't do it to the head of the family. So Thaddeus was in the chapel at the top of Lep Castle. It's the top level. And he decided to go ahead and go on with mass without Teague. Teague wasn't there yet. So he started mass. A few minutes later, Teague gets there, goes into a rage, goes up, pulls his sword out and kills Thaddeus on the altar. And this is good Irish history right there.
Yeah.
It's not, contrived or anything. This is good Irish history. And so the legend is people see Thaddeus all the time. They see the priest in the halls of Lep Castle and in the what is now called the Bloody Chapel up there. So when we go there, I'm doing a little bit of research as we get there. I'm like, okay, I'm going to concentrate on this. I'm not going to do the Red Woman. I'm not going to do the Elemental. I'm not going to do these other events that have happened here. I'm going to concentrate all my time on Thaddeus. So I go up into the Bloody Chapel and I take this picture. And when I look back at the picture, I have hundreds of orbs all around me. Oh. And of course, Lep Castle is also one of the most dusty places on the planet. I spent 6 months in the Sinai Desert, and Lep Castle's about as dusty as a Sinai Desert. So, right away you can go, okay, well, that's those are digital artifacts. This is a digital camera. That's what that is. So I was a little disappointing, but anyway, I spent a lot of time up there. They had an oubliette, a dungeon in the Bloody Chapel. Think about that. They had a dungeon in the chapel, and it was over to the left, or as you're facing the congregation, it's over to the left of the altar. And an oubliette is just a door in the floor. It's like a little cage in the floor. And an oubliette is French for to forget. So what you would do is you would take somebody and you'd throw them in the oubliette, which would usually be pretty small, little cage thing down there, close it up, and you just wouldn't feed them. You wouldn't water, do anything. And they just died down there, and you just kept putting people in there. During a renovation at the beginning of the beginning of the 20th century, they pulled 30 something bodies out of this oubliette when they found what it was. And so there's all these skeletons and stuff in the wall. And so anyway, I spent time there, and we were there for maybe 3 or 4 hours, and we went down and we talked to Sean, who is the owner of the castle, and his wife, and he's a musician, and he played he's got like this flute thing, Irish flute thing, yeah. And he told us some stories, and he played the flute, and man, I'm just sitting there going, what an thing. Yeah, you want to, the Louvre is pretty cool, but this is pretty damn cool too.
Absolutely.
So we get done and we say goodbye. We all take a picture at the front door, and they're sitting there waving at us, and we walk across the yard. And as we're leaving, a friend, Tammy Cody, she turns around and she takes some pictures of me and Dave and Eric, and she takes a picture of the front of Lep Castle. We leave. A little while later, we're gone, and looking at the photo, and you look above the window, above the front door, and there is a priest standing in that window. Now, the image of this priest, you can very easily go, that's pareidolia. That was some clouds and some trees that were reflecting on the. Okay, maybe, but what are the odds? Why didn't it look like a car in the window, or a waiter, or a woman in white, or a woman in red, or whatever? It was a priest in the window, and it was so. Those are the people say, well, why do you do all this travel? Why do you do this paranormal investigation stuff? I said, well, one, I love the travel. I love the history. And every once in a while, something will raise its head out of the muck, and you just go, what is that?
Oh, man. I think of the places that I've been before I was into this. I was in the Air Force for 7 years, a C-130 crew chief. And the best thing you probably know about a C-130 is it can land anywhere. And the worst thing about a C-130 is it can land anywhere.
Yeah. I've actually crashed in a C-130.
Oh, well,
yeah.
I have not had that experience, but I went to Auschwitz. I went to Bergen-Belsen. I went to Dachau.
Wow.
All these places. I went down in Hitler's bunkers and didn't know anything about any of this. If I only knew what to look for, what to listen for. boy, I could have seen and heard some things. But let me ask you this final question. There's a lot of places that have this history of being haunted. They're famous for being haunted, and people go there all the time and do all these investigations, and sometimes they see things, sometimes they don't. Do you think places get haunted because everybody thinks they're haunted and keep going there? Or yeah, that's my question.
Yeah, so that is definitely a theory. And I'm going to bring up Frank Sinelli again. He talks about, different ways of investigating. For me, I go in, I have a whole series of things that I do before I do an investigation. And my investigations are very quiet. We're listening, we're feeling, we're, videoing and all that stuff. And Frank is like, no, that's not what attracts a spirit. So what attracts the spirits is a bunch of people standing around, telling stories, listening to music, drinking, some good wine and fellowship. And then that's what the spirits are interested in. And they come there. So, could we maybe create an environment that would be attractive to someone that's on the other side? Maybe that's what it is.
That's a very interesting point.
So
never thought of that. And one thing that I found, and we got to go. I know I'm keeping too much of your time, but one thing,
I'm fine. I'm good.
A lot of people like you, they have, the K2 meters, and, our friend Wes Forsyth says people with all their blinky lights, they have all of these gadgets, and they get some stuff. But when I go out and I do an investigation, Greg, when I do it, all I do is I bring these. I just got divining rods. And I found that a lot of times when people aren't getting much results at all with the electronics and the fancy stuff, I get a lot of results with these divining rods. And I'm just wondering, do old spirits, people that are from old times, recognize old time technology and maybe respond to that more so than newfangled technology?
Well, I mean, in theory, they would, that would be something that they would recognize, as opposed to the box with blinking lights.
Mm-hmm.
I think the box with blinking lights would be something that they would be interested in.
That's true.
Just because they wouldn't know what in the world is that.
Mm-hmm.
But maybe they recognize the divining rods as something, that is a communication type device that, maybe they had or they knew about when they were alive.
Interesting.
But once again, if you have 20 gadgets that you're always playing around with, you're never going to get any consistency. Mm-hmm. So I commend you for going, this is my tool. This is the way I do it. And I'm going to continue doing it. And I'm a
one-trick pony, Greg. You know that. So find one thing if I'm lucky enough to find one thing that works, I'll stick with it. And I just had a great question to ask you. I have two questions to close with. And be thinking about the second one will be, since you're the paranormal detective, you've been doing this a long time, give us 3 or 4 techniques that can help everybody in their paranormal investigations. And number 2, a lot of people, you mentioned a medium, and I do a thing where I talk to dead people, people that have passed with the divining rods. And there's something that's inside me that says, you're supposed to be a medium, go the step further, talk to him as a medium. My love, Cynthia, is like, no, don't do that. What is your perspective from your experience on mediumship? Is it something you should be afraid of? Is something too much of a risk? Answer the mediumship question, if you would, your opinion, and then give us those some of your best practices, and we'll close with that.
Well, there's different ways that you can look at the mediumship part: a spiritual way, a political way, and maybe a professional way. And the spiritual way, if something's dragging you towards something, maybe that's what you're supposed to do. The political way is, how are you going to affect the other people in your realm of influence by all of a sudden, oh hell, the Christian whistleblower is now medium. What happened there? And, you never know, because I tell people, I'm like, man, the moment you open your mouth and say you're a ghost hunter, you've lost credibility.
You have.
Bam. As soon as you say that. Now, the interesting thing is if you look at the catechism, if you look at the Catholic Church, I mean, that's pretty paranormal.
It is very,
the Mormon religion, very paranormal.
Paranormal.
And so, but all of a sudden ghost, hunting for ghosts is taboo. It's like, wait a second. It's a whole bunch of millions of people, billions of people that believe in, this other stuff. Why can't I believe that maybe grandma is here watching over me? What's the problem? So how is that going to influence the things around you? And then the professional side of it is, depending on what you want to do, is how do you build credibility on that? For what I do, when you're going into anything that has anything to do with security or intelligence, or lots of money, to where you actually have to have a background investigation, you have to maybe go through a polygraph experience and all that stuff. If they do a personality inventory, like a Minnesota multiphasic personality inventory, is a series of, I don't know, it's like 500, 600 questions. And as you're answering these questions, all kinds of stuff that they ask you, and they ask you in multiple ways.
Right.
But there's questions like, do you see people that other people can't see? Do you hear voices? Do you do this? Do you do that? And as you're answering yes on this, because of your experience as a paranormal investigator, you're losing points.
Absolutely.
So, I mean, right on the test, boom, he's going down that trail. And so, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So when you're talking about doing it, I think what you do is awesome. And we've talked about that before. Yeah. I'm kind of in tune to that. Makes more sense to me. Mm-hmm. But there's classes on mediumship. I believe that maybe there's a gift that, you're connected at a higher realm, or you're more intuitive, or your instinct is better, or whatever it is. It might be something natural. It from genetics, from the spirits, or whatever. But I also believe that when you do something, the more you do it, typically the better you get at it. Mm-hmm. It's kind of like walking across a green, grassy field. You walk through it one time, you don't see your trail. You walk through it 1,000 times, and you have a nice trail that you go over. Just throwing a baseball, same thing. So, there are mediumship classes. Dakota Lawrence teaches one. Mm-hmm. And, it's how do you awaken this intuition in you, or whatever it is, and how do you get it better?
Right.
So, did I don't think I answered your question, but
you gave me some stuff to think about for sure. But some best practices for our people that are interested in investigating all these things that go bump in the night, as it were.
All right. So the number one thing is the thing that you don't want to do. And that's going to be tons of research. There's a whole bunch of argument on, do I research a location before I get there, or do I not research a location? Well, if you subscribe that you don't want to do the research because you're afraid that the research is going to formulate your opinion, then that's fine. But you need to go to the location multiple times, right? 20 times, 30 times, as many times as you can. That's why it's really important that everybody picks someplace close to their house that they're going to go to and do their research. Something really cool. I guarantee you there's something cool close to your house within a few miles that will be something interesting to look at and something interesting to research. And I think the research is incredibly important, as opposed to just the interpretation of when you go there. Also, when you go there, think about doing it in layers. Think about, when you're conducting your research, how do you conduct the research first? Start off with the least amount of intrusiveness, the least amount of influence on that space. Because when you walk into a room, you have changed that room fundamentally. Mm-hmm. You have moved the atmosphere around. You have created, very, 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 very microscopic issues in magnetism, and your electrical processes has changed all this. And something in the military, when I was an operations specialist in the Navy, Yeah, yes. By the way, for those that just like cocked their head, I did 4 years Army, 4 years Navy, 2 years Air Force. So I have armed forces.
Marines, Greg.
Yeah, I skipped it. I have armed forces attention deficit disorder.
Yeah.
So when I'm looking at that from an operations specialist Navy standpoint of it, is everything has frequencies. I can identify any aircraft based on basically it's got a fingerprint.
Mm-hmm.
It's almost a DNA match on the frequency is the way the engines work and the way that their radar or whatever they're transmitting all has little fundamental differences. So you pick up on those particular things. So if you're going to go in and investigate and you hear a legend and you go to the house and you pay them $100 to go in the house, and then you drag a bunch of cables in, you drag a bunch of cameras, you drag a bunch of equipment, you're plugging everything in, you're changing that thing completely.
Gotcha. Good point.
So it'd be a good idea if you worked with someone who you trusted as a medium or a clairvoyant or, just somebody who's sensitive, somebody who owns a pair of friggin', divining rods. Have them go in first with no electronics, no cell phones for sure. Cell phones jack up everything. And send them in first without anybody else. Let them go through and get the sense of the place and then come out, and you slowly work your technology in there. Man, I like I said, I've traveled all over Europe, all over the United States, and I watch people pay thousands of dollars to go to a location and to be able to have access to that location. And they're at that location for 4 hours, and 3 hours and 22 minutes are staring at their gadget instead of having the experience. Put your gadget down.
Absolutely.
Have the experience.
Absolutely. And I think our friend Wes would agree with you 100%. He said basically the same things to me.
I love that man.
He is a great guy. He really is. I got it. Again, it's for some reason, it's probably been 2 years since I've talked to Wes. I'm going to correct that though. Greg, it's been a pleasure. And let's don't let so much time go by between now and the next time we talk.
I'm here for you anytime, my friend.
And I live in Kansas now, so I'm not that too far from you. We might be able to even get together physically at some point. That'd be awesome.
Where is Kansas?
Kansas is straight up from you, about 10 hours.
Well, I was going to say, because I'm with Amy Bruni and Adam Berry and Chip Coffee at Belvoir Winery in March.
Where's that?
It's in Missouri.
Well, in March, make sure you send that to me. I'll go there because I'll be there. That's not too far. It's the next state over. It's next door.
Okay. Belvoir is really, really cool. And so I'm going to be doing that. And we're doing with Kenna. We're gonna be doing an event in Savannah, Georgia, and that's going to be real cool. I've wanted to go to Savannah. Savannah is those
places.
Yeah. I mean, if anything's happened, it's happened there.
St. Augustine or New Orleans, right?
Yeah, definitely.
I would definitely love to go to those, but yeah, we'll definitely hook up, and we need to talk some more. There's so much that I could talk to you about, and we've already been an hour and a quarter, but we really appreciate your time, and let's do this again for sure. He's Greg Lawson. He's the Paranormal Detective, and you can find his website is authorgreglawson.com. And do you have any other places that you'd like to direct people to, Greg?
Just the www.theparanormaldetective.com.
Theparanormaldetective.com. Okay, fantastic.
That's it.
And we appreciate you very much for being here, Greg. I salute all of you that are here seeking after truth, and put Greg's suggestions into practice. I guarantee that it's going to enhance your enjoyment, your understanding, and maybe more importantly, your contributions to the paranormal and the spiritual realm. For Greg Lawson, I'm Jeffrey Daugherty, the Christian Whistleblower, saying thanks to you very much. Greg, all the very best to you, and we'll look forward to seeing you again real soon.
Thanks, man. Look forward to it.
Hey, my pleasure.